My earliest memories aren't of bedtime stories or family picnics, they're of screaming matches and slammed doors. I'm Elsie, and for the first 8 years of my life, I watched my parents' marriage crumble one fight at a time. Dad always found something wrong with everything Mom did. The dinner was too salty. The laundry wasn't folded right. She spent too much money at the grocery store. She was teaching me bad habits. It didn't matter what she did, it was never good enough for him. "You're completely useless, Sarah," he would shout, his face red with anger. "Can't you do anything right?" I would hide in my room during these fights, pressing my hands against my ears, but their voices always found their way through the walls. After each fight, I'd hear Mom crying in the bathroom, trying to muffle her sobs with running water. The pattern continued year after year. Some days were better than others, but the tension was always there, like a storm waiting to break. Dad worked as a successful corporate lawyer, and he wielded his professional authority at home like a weapon. Mom was a stay-at-home mother who had given up her teaching career when I was born, something Dad never let her forget. "I provide everything for this family," he'd remind her during their arguments. "The least you could do is run a proper household." My 8th birthday was surprisingly peaceful. Dad even smiled a few times, and Mom made my favorite chocolate cake. Looking back now, I realize Mom must have already made her decision by then. The next morning, she was gone. No note, no goodbye, no explanation. Just empty drawers and a half-empty closet. Dad went ballistic, calling everyone we knew, hiring private investigators, but she had vanished completely. When the divorce proceedings started, she didn't show up to court. The judge granted Dad full custody and terminated her parental rights. I remember sitting in that courtroom, wearing the blue dress Mom had bought me just a month before, wondering if she would suddenly appear and explain everything. But she never did. Dad gripped my hand so tightly it hurt as we left the courthouse. "She's a traitor," he spat, his jaw clenched. "We don't need her. We never needed her." But I did need her. I needed my mom to protect me from Dad's temper, to braid my hair in the mornings, to tell me everything would be okay. Instead, I was left alone with a father whose anger now had no other target but me. That's when Dad decided to hire a nanny. "I can't work and take care of a child," he announced one evening. "We need help around here." Enter Maria Chen, young, pretty, and at first, seemingly perfect. She was 26, had a degree in early childhood education, and made the best chocolate chip cookies I'd ever tasted. When she started working for us, I thought things might finally get better. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. Dad and Maria would exchange these weird little smiles when they thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and they'd suddenly stop talking, like teenagers caught passing notes in class. Maria started staying later and later after Dad got home from work, and they'd sit in the kitchen talking in low voices. One evening in October, about 6 months after Maria started working for us, Dad called me into his study. Maria was there too, standing next to his desk with this huge smile on her face. "Elsie," Dad said, actually looking happy for the first time since Mom left, "I have something important to tell you. Maria and I are getting married." I remember feeling relieved, honestly. Maria had been so good to me. She helped me with my homework, made my favorite pasta dishes, and never yelled like Dad did. When I had nightmares, she'd sit with me and tell me stories until I fell back asleep. Maybe this was our chance at being a real family again. "That's great," I said, and I meant it. Maria hugged me, and her perfume smelled like vanilla and flowers. "We'll be so happy together," she promised. "You'll see." The wedding was small but elegant. I was the flower girl, wearing a pink dress that Maria helped me pick out. She looked beautiful in her white gown, and Dad couldn't stop smiling. That was the last day I saw the Maria I knew. It started small. The day after they got back from their honeymoon, I left my backpack in the living room like I always did. Maria walked in, saw it, and her whole face changed. "Pick that up immediately," she snapped. "This isn't a pigsty." I was shocked. Maria had never spoken to me like that before. But that was just the beginning. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. My bed wasn't made properly. I was too loud when I walked. I didn't say please and thank you enough times. One day, confused and hurt by her complete transformation, I worked up the courage to ask her directly, "Why are you so different now? You used to be so nice to me." Maria laughed, not the warm laugh I remembered, but something cold and sharp. "Oh, sweetie," she said, examining her perfectly manicured nails, "before, I was just an employee. Now I'm the lady of this house, and you need to learn your place. When I tell you to do something, you do it. No questions asked." I ran to Dad's study that evening, tears streaming down my face, and told him everything. I thought he would protect me, set things right. Instead, his face turned that dangerous shade of red I remembered from his fights with Mom. "You're just like your mother," he snarled, slamming his hand on the desk. "Always complaining, always causing problems. Let me make something very clear. If I hear you saying one more word against Maria to anyone, you'll be very, very sorry. Do you understand me?" I nodded, my whole body shaking, and fled to my room. That night, I cried into my pillow until it was soaked through, wishing desperately for Mom to come back and save me. Life became a minefield of new rules and restrictions. Maria wielded her authority like a weapon, finding new ways to make my life miserable every day. First, she banned my favorite pop music because it was too vulgar. Then she took away the small TV in my room, claiming it was distracting me from my studies, even though I had straight A's. She started controlling what I wore, throwing out my favorite jeans because they were too casual. My colorful bedspread was replaced with plain white sheets because my room needed to match the house aesthetic. She even scheduled my shower times, no longer than 10 minutes, and only at specific hours she approved. The only light in this darkness was Grandma Helen, Mom's mother. She visited every few weeks, always bringing me something special, books, clothes, or little pieces of jewelry that Maria couldn't justify taking away because they were family gifts. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Grandma would ask during her visits, her eyes searching my face for the truth. I'd feel Dad's and Maria's eyes on me, remember Dad's threat, and force a smile. "I'm fine, Grandma, everything's great." This went on for 3 years. I learned to live by Maria's rules, to stay quiet, to be invisible. Then, when I was 13, Maria announced she was pregnant. Dad was ecstatic. He started converting the guest room into a nursery before she was even showing. Maria spent hours looking at baby clothes and designing the perfect room for their precious daughter. When little Sophie was born, it was like I ceased to exist entirely. Dad took photos of everything she did, her first smile, her first attempt to roll over, her first grab at a toy. Maria posted hourly updates on social media about her perfect little angel. But 6 months into their parental bliss, Maria started complaining. "I'm so exhausted," she'd whine to Dad. "The baby needs constant attention. I can't even get my nails done anymore." Dad, ever the problem solver, suggested hiring a babysitter. "There are plenty of qualified college students looking for work," he said one evening over dinner. "We could interview some." I watched Maria's face twist into a grimace at the mention of college students. Her hand tightened around her fork, and I could practically read her thoughts. After all, wasn't that exactly how she'd gotten her position in this house? A young, pretty student nanny who ended up becoming the wife? The irony wasn't lost on me, even at 13. "Absolutely not," Maria cut him off, her fork clattering against her plate. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me across the table. "We don't need to hire anyone. We have a perfectly capable babysitter right here." Dad followed her gaze and nodded slowly. "You're right. Elsie can help out with Sophie. It'll be good for her to learn some responsibility." What started as helping out quickly turned into full-time, unpaid childcare. Every day after school, Maria would be waiting by the door, Sophie already in her arms. The moment I stepped inside, she'd practically throw the baby at me. "She's been fed, but she'll need changing soon," Maria would say, already grabbing her designer purse. "I have an appointment at the salon," or "I'm meeting the girls for coffee," or whatever excuse she had that day. I loved Sophie. She was an innocent baby who didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of all this. But I was 14, trying to maintain my grades while essentially becoming a full-time nanny. Instead of doing my algebra homework, I was warming bottles and making baby food. Rather than working on my history project, I was changing diapers and singing lullabies. Maria would breeze in around 6:30, just before Dad got home, carrying takeout containers from expensive restaurants. "I'm exhausted from cooking all day," she'd announce as Dad walked in, setting the food on the table. I'd be there, still in my school uniform, Sophie on my hip, homework untouched. One day at school, I couldn't take it anymore. During lunch, I broke down and told my friend Amanda everything, about being forced to watch Sophie every day, about not having time for homework, about Maria's lies to Dad. "That's not right," Amanda said, her face serious. "My mom works for Child Protective Services. This is exactly the kind of thing she deals with. I should have known better than to trust anyone." 2 days later, I was home with Sophie, trying to simultaneously feed her strained peas and read my English assignment, when there was a knock at the door. 3 people in professional attire introduced themselves as representatives from CPS. They asked where Maria was. I told the truth, at her weekly spa appointment. They looked around the house, took notes, asked me questions about my daily routine. Then they called my father. Dad arrived 20 minutes later, his face a mask of calm that didn't reach his eyes. I knew that look. It was the same one he used to wear before his worst fights with Mom. The CPS workers explained their concerns about leaving a 14-year-old in charge of an infant for extended periods. They issued a formal warning about negligent supervision and left their card. The moment their car pulled away, Dad exploded. "You treacherous little snake," he roared, his face purple with rage. "Just like your mother, always trying to destroy this family. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't mean to," I started, but he cut me off. "Shut up. You're exactly like her, a traitor. You betrayed this family, betrayed Maria's trust." Maria came home then, her hair freshly styled, nails gleaming. Dad told her everything, but remarkably, his anger never touched her. Instead, she burst into tears, claiming I was trying to ruin her life, that I was jealous of her relationship with Sophie, that I was ungrateful for everything they'd done for me. "Go to your room," Dad bellowed. "No phone, no computer, no leaving the house except for school for the next month. And if you ever pull something like this again." He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. A week after the CPS incident, I waited until Dad and Maria were asleep, then crept downstairs with my phone that they'd forgotten to take away. My hands were shaking as I dialed Grandma Helen's number. "Grandma?" I whispered when she answered. "I need help." My voice broke as I told her everything, the forced babysitting, the neglect, Dad's rage, the punishment. She listened quietly, only occasionally making soft sounds of distress. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," she said firmly. "Pack a bag, sweetheart, just in case." True to her word, Grandma Helen arrived at 9 a.m. sharp the next day. She wasn't her usual diplomatic self. She stormed into the house like an avenging angel, her normally perfect hair slightly disheveled, her eyes blazing. "I've watched this situation long enough," she announced to Dad and Maria in our living room. "I know everything, how you've turned my granddaughter into an unpaid servant, how you've been neglecting her education, how you punish her for speaking the truth." Dad started to protest, but Grandma cut him off. "I'm taking Elsie to live with me. You can either agree to this amicably, or we can let a judge decide after I show them the evidence I've been collecting." "You can't just take her," Dad spluttered, but I noticed Maria's expression shift. She touched Dad's arm gently. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe it would be better for everyone. We could focus on Sophie, and Elsie would have more opportunities with Helen." I could see the wheels turning in Dad's head as Maria continued to whisper persuasively in his ear. Within an hour, he agreed to let me go. Grandma's house, or rather, mansion, was like something out of a dream. Located in the wealthy part of town, it had a sweeping driveway, manicured gardens, and more rooms than I could count. My bedroom was bigger than our entire living room at Dad's house, with a window seat overlooking the rose garden. "This is your home now," Grandma said, helping me unpack. "You can decorate it however you like." I transferred to Winchester Prep, where I quickly made real friends for the first time in years. No one there knew my history, and I could just be myself, not the unwanted stepdaughter, not the unpaid babysitter, just Elsie. On my 16th birthday, Grandma called me into her study. She was sitting behind her antique desk, looking more serious than usual. "I've set up a college fund for you," she announced. "It should cover tuition at any university you choose, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, wherever you want to go." That night, I stayed up late studying for my AP biology test. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just studying to escape my reality, I was studying for my future. I found the photo album by accident while helping Grandma reorganize her office a month after the conversation about college. It was leather-bound, tucked away on a high shelf, behind some financial records. When I opened it, my mother's face stared back at me, younger, happier, in pictures I'd never seen before. My heart started racing as I flipped through the pages. There she was at my age, then at her high school graduation, then at what looked like her college years. She looked so much like me, it was startling. The same dark hair, the same smile, even the same way of tilting her head in photos. "Grandma," I called out, my voice trembling with sudden hope. "Look what I found." Grandma came into the office and froze when she saw what I was holding. "We should contact her," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Now that I'm living with you, Dad can't stop her from seeing me anymore. She doesn't have to be afraid of him. We could." "Elsie," Grandma interrupted softly, and something in her tone made my stomach drop. "There's something you need to know." She walked to her desk and opened her laptop, clicking through folders until she found what she was looking for. "I should have told you this sooner, but I was trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Grandma took a deep breath. "The day after your mother left, I emailed her. I knew where she was, she'd contacted me briefly before leaving. I told her she needed to come back for you, that she couldn't leave you with your father. I promised to help her financially, to support both of you, to do whatever was necessary to keep you both safe." My hands were shaking now. What did she say?" Instead of answering, Grandma turned the laptop toward me. The email was dated one day after Mom left, and it was short. "Mom, don't contact me about Elsie again. I don't want her. I never have. I never loved her, she was just a chain keeping me tied to that house, to that life. I don't care what happens to her. She's Robert's problem now. Sarah." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I read it again, and again, trying to make them say something different. But they remained the same, cold, cruel, final. "I saved it," Grandma said quietly. "I thought someday you might need to know the truth." I closed the photo album slowly, my mother's smiling face suddenly seeming like a mockery. All these years, I'd imagined her forced away by Dad's cruelty, too afraid to contact me, perhaps watching me from afar and loving me in secret. But the truth was simpler and far more brutal, she'd never wanted me at all. The next 2 years were the happiest of my life. I got accepted to Princeton with a perfect GPA and spent my weekdays immersed in my studies, making new friends, and building a life for myself. Every weekend, I'd call Grandma Helen, and during holidays and vacations, I'd return home to her. "Tell me everything," she'd say as we shared tea in her garden, and I'd talk for hours about my classes, my friends, my dreams for the future. Then, halfway through my sophomore year, Grandma got sick. It started with what seemed like a simple cold, but quickly turned into something much worse. The doctors discovered stage 4 lung cancer, already spread throughout her body. They gave her 6 months. She fought hard, never losing her dignity or her sharp wit, but the doctors were right. I spent that summer break by her bedside, watching her slip away. She died on a quiet Tuesday morning in August, holding my hand and telling me how proud she was of me. The funeral was well attended. Grandma Helen had been a pillar of the community, and people came from all over to pay their respects. Business associates, charity board members, friends from her social clubs, distant relatives I barely knew, they all came to say goodbye. But 3 people were conspicuously absent: my mother, my father, and Maria. Not that I expected them to come, but their absence felt like one final confirmation of how completely they'd cut themselves out of our lives. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Mr. Patterson, Grandma's notary, asking me to come to his office for the reading of the will. When I arrived, I found someone I hadn't seen in over a decade: my mother. She was with a man who looked about 5 years younger than her, dressed in an expensive but ill-fitting suit. She barely glanced at me when I walked in, though I caught her checking her watch repeatedly as she urged Mr. Patterson to get on with it. The reading itself was brief but devastating, at least for her. Grandma had left me her house, all her jewelry, and the bulk of her fortune, $700,000. My mother received $100,000 and nothing else. This can't be right, my mother burst out, her composure finally cracking. Tears streamed down her face, smearing her perfect makeup. I'm her daughter. I have debts to pay. I need that money. The younger man with her shifted uncomfortably in his chair as she continued to sob and plead, claiming she was entitled to more, that it wasn't fair, that she needed help. I stood up without a word and walked out, her cries following me down the hallway. The next morning, I was in Grandma's study, my study now, sorting through decades of documents. The doorbell rang around noon. When I opened the door, my mother stood there, wearing a different designer outfit than yesterday, but the same desperate expression. She walked past me into the foyer, her eyes drinking in every detail of the house. Oh, it's exactly as I remember it. I grew up here, you know. That chip in the marble by the stairs? That's from when I was 7 and dropped my roller skates. Why are you here? I asked, closing the door but not moving from it. She ran her hand along the banister. I miss this place, miss you. We have so much catching up to do, don't you think? Mother and daughter, finally reunited. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. 12 years. It took you 12 years to miss me? I know I made mistakes, she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. I was young, trapped in a horrible marriage with your father. I wasn't thinking clearly. She moved into the living room, settling onto the couch as if she belonged there. Actually, sweetie, I was hoping we could help each other out. I'm in a bit of a financial bind right now, and this house is so big for just one person. No, I said firmly. You can't live here. Not now, not ever. Her face changed then, the mask of maternal affection slipping. I'm your mother, Elsie, you can't just throw me out on the street. I gave birth to you. And then you abandoned me, I replied, my voice steady. You left me with a father you knew was toxic. You never called, never wrote, never checked if I was okay. She paled slightly but recovered quickly. You don't understand how complicated adult relationships are. If you turn your back on me now, I'll make sure everyone knows what a cruel, heartless daughter you are. I'll tell them how you're leaving your own mother homeless. I walked to the study, retrieved my laptop, and returned. Go ahead, tell everyone. And I'll show them this. I opened the saved email, the one Grandma had kept all these years. I don't want her. I never have. I never loved her, I read aloud. She's Robert's problem now. Should I forward this to all those society friends you're so worried about? Post it on social media maybe? The color drained from her face completely. She stood up, grabbing her designer purse. You're just like your father, cruel and manipulative. No, I said calmly. I'm like my grandmother, I see through your act, and I keep receipts. She fled the house in a rage, the door slamming behind her. That was 6 months ago. I'm graduating from Princeton next month, with honors in business administration. I've already accepted a job offer at a consulting firm in town, and in July, I'll move back into Grandma's house permanently. My house now. Dad tried to call once, probably after hearing about the inheritance from my mother. I didn't answer. Maria still posts perfect family photos with Sophie on social media. I blocked her account. My mother occasionally sends manipulative texts about forgiveness and family obligations. I blocked her number too. Some people say you can't choose your family, but I disagree. Grandma chose me when my own parents wouldn't, and that's the legacy I'm choosing to honor. I'm having the house renovated next month, updating it while keeping all the things that made it special to Grandma. Yesterday, I found a letter Grandma had written to me before she died, tucked away in her desk drawer. Remember, she wrote, your worth isn't determined by those who left, but by how you choose to move forward. You are stronger than you know, smarter than you believe, and more loved than you can imagine. She was right. The past is the past, and I'm done letting it define my future.
This story is titled, Kicked Out My Wife and Stepdaughter After They Tried to Exclude My Son from Our Family. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here I am. I've been married to my wife, Kelly, for 8 years. I thought we had a solid relationship, a good partnership. She had one daughter from a previous marriage, Ava, and I had one son, Liam, who's 10. From the moment we said, I do, I've done everything in my power to provide a good life for all of us. I'm the one footing the bill for the house, the cars, the vacations, and basically everything else. And yet somehow Kelly has managed to repay me by treating my son like he's a guest in his own home. We live in a 3-bedroom house. Ava, who just turned 11, has her own room. A room I insisted on decorating for her, by the way. Liam also has his own room, and Kelly and I share the master bedroom. From the outside, it probably looks like a pretty functional setup. But inside these walls, there's a divide that keeps growing wider and more impossible to ignore. Ava is, well, she's a mini version of her mom. She's entitled and spoiled, though not in an outright malicious way. She doesn't bully Liam outright, but she always makes it clear that she's the princess of the house. Kelly. Kelly is a different story. From the very beginning, it's like she decided that Liam was my kid and not her responsibility. She barely speaks to him unless she has to. If he's upset or hurt, she's indifferent. It's not just that she doesn't go out of her way to spend time with him, it's that she actively avoids doing so. All her focus is on Ava, her parties, her needs, her whims. Liam? He's an afterthought. At first, I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Blending families is hard, right? Figured she needed time to bond with Liam. But 8 years later, how much time does someone need? If anything, it's gotten worse. It's like she's built a wall between herself and Liam, and she's determined to keep it standing. And Liam, bless him, he's a good kid. He's kind and polite, always willing to help out. He's been through so much already. Losing his mom 2 years before Kelly and I got married. He's always been hopeful that Kelly would be the mother figure he's been missing. But the way she treats him, it's like a knife to the heart. I see it in his eyes. The way he looks at her, hoping for a shred of affection or acknowledgement, only to be met with indifference or, worse, annoyance. I wasn't stupid not to notice, but I was giving her a chance. When Kelly would leave Liam out of family activities, I told myself it might be just a coincidence. When she ignored his achievements while praising Ava for the smallest things, I chalked it up to her being busy or distracted. But now, looking back, I see it for what it was. A pattern. A clear and deliberate pattern of exclusion. I've tried to talk to her about it over the years, but it always turns into a fight. She accuses me of being overprotective or overreacting. She insists that she treats both kids equally, even when it's blatantly untrue. I've even tried family counseling, but she refused to participate, claiming that I was the one with the problem, not her. The divide in our house has become unbearable. Ava walks around like she owns the place, and Kelly enables her every whim. Meanwhile, Liam tiptoes around, trying not to upset anyone, trying to find his place in a home that doesn't feel like his own. There was one moment that stands out in my mind, a moment that made me realize just how bad things had gotten. It was a Saturday morning, and I was working in the garage. Liam came out to show me a drawing he'd been working on. He's got a talent for art, something he's really passionate about. He was so excited, beaming as he handed me the paper. "This is amazing, buddy," I said, genuinely impressed. "Let's show Kelly." We went inside and Liam proudly held up his drawing. "Look what I made, Kelly," he said, his eyes shining with hope. She barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Liam," she said, her tone flat. Then she turned back to Ava, who was whining about wanting a snack. "What do you want, sweetheart?" she cooed, completely ignoring Liam. The way his face fell, I'll never forget it. It was like watching a balloon deflate. He walked away quietly, mumbling something about going back to his room. I stood there, stunned, angry, and heartbroken all at once. I wanted to scream at Kelly, to shake her, and make her see what she was doing, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me. This wasn't going to change. Now, every time I see Liam retreat to his room or look at Kelly with that mix of hope and disappointment, I feel a knot in my stomach. He deserves better. He deserves to feel loved and valued in his own home. And if Kelly isn't willing to step up and be the mother he needs, then I'll have to figure out another way to give him the life he deserves. This is our reality. A blended family that looks perfect only from the outside. I'm sharing this because I need to get it off my chest, and maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe someone has advice or words of wisdom. Because right now I feel like I'm failing my son, and that's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. What do you think? Update. The breaking point came last weekend. It was Ava's 11th birthday, and Kelly went all out. She decorated the backyard with balloons and streamers, hired a clown, and got a custom cake with Ava's favorite cartoon characters on it. The whole setup screamed over the top, but I went along with it. Ava was excited, and I thought it might be a good opportunity for everyone to bond, or at least pretend to. Liam was looking forward to the party too. He had saved up his allowance to buy Ava a small gift, something she'd mentioned wanting weeks ago. He even made her a handmade card, spending hours drawing and coloring it. When he showed it to me before the party, he was practically glowing with pride. "Do you think she'll like it?" he asked, his eyes wide with hope. "She'll love it," I assured him. "It's thoughtful and personal. She'll see how much effort you put into it." The party started off well enough. The kids played games, chased each other around the yard, and laughed like only kids can. Liam tried his best to join in, even though he's naturally a bit quieter and more reserved. When it was time for the cake, everyone gathered around the table. The cake was a masterpiece, covered in colorful icing and shaped like Ava's favorite character. The kids oohed and awed as Kelly lit the candles. I noticed Liam standing off to the side, holding his gift and card. I gave him a little nudge. "Go stand next to Ava. Let's get a picture of you two together," I said. He smiled shyly and walked over, standing next to Ava with his gift in hand. Just as the camera was about to snap, Kelly's voice cut through the air. "Liam, step out for a second," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I want a picture with just Ava." Liam froze. He looked at me, confused and hurt. His smile faded, and he hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, his head hanging low. My heart sank. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I tried to keep it in check. After the picture was taken, I walked over to Liam. "Hey, bud, you okay?" I asked softly. He nodded, but I could see the tears welling up in his eyes. He quickly wiped them away and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was the moment I snapped. I turned to Kelly, who was busy organizing the next activity. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. She looked at me like I had 3 heads. "What are you talking about?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you tell Liam to step out of the picture? He's part of this family too," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Kelly rolled her eyes. "I just wanted a picture of Ava. It's her birthday after all. What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that you made Liam feel excluded on purpose," I shot back. "Do you have any idea how that made him feel?" "You're overreacting," she said dismissively. "He'll be fine." I turned to Liam, who was now standing off to the side, clutching his gift and card. "Does he look fine to you?" I asked, my voice rising. The tension was palpable. The other parents at the party quickly averted their eyes, pretending not to notice the argument unfolding. Kelly stormed off, muttering something under her breath, and I stayed with Liam, trying to comfort him. The party continued, but the damage was done. Liam's mood was ruined, and so was mine. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I confronted Kelly again. "You're driving a wedge in this family," I told her. Her response was as cold as ever. "I'm already doing enough by letting him live here. Don't ask me to do more." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Letting him live here? As if he were some unwelcome guest? My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. This is his home, Kelly. I think you've forgotten that, I said firmly. And if you can't treat him like he belongs here, then maybe this isn't going to work. She didn't respond, but the look on her face said it all. The divide in our family had never felt wider, and I knew something had to change. Soon. The fight didn't end with Ava's party. If anything, it ignited a fuse that had been smoldering for years. For the next few days, Kelly and I barely spoke. The tension in the house was suffocating. Even Ava, who usually thrived on being the center of attention, seemed uneasy. But Liam? Liam just kept his head down and stayed out of the way, as if he were used to being collateral damage. It was a Thursday evening when everything boiled over. I came home from work, exhausted but determined to address what had happened. Kelly was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone while Ava sat at the table doing homework. Liam was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in his room like usual. We need to talk, I said, setting my bag down. Kelly didn't even look up. About what? She asked. Her tone clipped. About Liam. About the way you treat him. That got her attention. She put her phone down and crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. What now? I thought we already had this conversation. No, we didn't, I said, my voice steady but firm. We had a fight. There's a difference. And I'm not letting this go. Ava glanced up from her homework, sensing the brewing storm, but Kelly waved her off. Go to your room, Ava, she said. Ava didn't argue, grabbing her books and retreating upstairs. Once we were alone, I took a deep breath and began. Liam's a good kid. He's kind, he's respectful, and he's done nothing but try to be part of this family. But you've shut him out from day one, and I'm done pretending it's okay. Kelly rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't make me the villain here. I've done plenty for him. Like what? I shouted. Ignoring him? Treating him like a burden? Letting Ava walk all over him? That's not being a stepmom. That's being a bully. Her face flushed with anger. How dare you call me a bully? I've done everything I can to make this work. But he's not my kid. He's your responsibility, not mine. And Ava's not mine, I said, my voice rising. But I've treated her like she is. I've provided for her, supported her, loved her. Why can't you do the same for Liam? Because it's different, she snapped. Ava's my daughter. Liam, he's just your son. Her words hit me. Just your son. As if he were some outsider, an unwelcome guest in his own home. I stared at her, my hands shaking with anger. Do you even hear yourself right now? I asked, my voice low and trembling. You're not just hurting him, you're hurting us, this family. And if you can't see that, then maybe you don't belong here either. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But instead, she doubled down. You're unbelievable. I've put up with so much from you and Liam, and now you're threatening to kick me out? Fine. Maybe I should leave. Maybe you and your precious son would be better off without me. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I didn't respond. I turned and walked away, heading upstairs to check on Liam. He was sitting on his bed, headphones on, sketching in his notebook. When he saw me, he pulled off his headphones and smiled weakly. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? I sat down next to him, my chest tight with guilt and sadness. I'm working on it, bud, I said, ruffling his hair. I promise. The next morning, I decided I needed solid evidence before making any serious decisions. I hated the idea of spying in my own home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on behind my back. The tension in the house, the way Liam seemed to retreat into himself more every day, it all pointed to something deeper than what I had already seen. I needed to know the truth, not just for my own clarity, but for Liam's sake. The truth will also help me in the divorce process that I'm now seriously considering. So I ordered a couple of discreet cameras online, the kind small enough to blend into the background without drawing attention. They arrived 2 days later, and I spent the evening carefully installing them in common areas: the living room, the kitchen, and most importantly, Liam's room. I took extra care to position them where they would capture the interactions without invading anyone's privacy unnecessarily. For the next week, I reviewed the footage every night after everyone went to bed. At first, the recordings didn't show anything unusual. Liam mostly stayed in his room, reading or sketching. Kelly and Ava went about their routines, and there were no outright conflicts. For a moment, I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was being paranoid or overreacting. But something from the inside told me my doubts were true. Then, on the third day, I found it. The footage began innocuously enough. Liam was in the living room, sitting quietly on the couch with a book in his hands. Ava entered the frame, her posture immediately exuding entitlement. She walked straight up to Liam and snatched the book from his hands without a word. Liam looked up at her, startled, and reached out to take it back. "This isn't your house," Ava hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Stop acting like you belong here." She tossed the book across the room, and Liam froze, his face a mixture of confusion and hurt. He got up slowly and walked over to retrieve the book, but before he could pick it up, Kelly entered the room. She looked at the scene, saw Liam reaching for the book, and said coldly, "Leave it, Liam. You don't need to cause trouble." Liam's shoulders slumped, and he turned away without a word. Kelly didn't even glance at Ava, who was smirking triumphantly. My hands clenched into fists as I watched the scene unfold. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time slip. This was calculated exclusion, and it was coming from both of them. The next incident occurred in the kitchen. Liam had bought a few snacks with his allowance and had neatly stored them in a corner of the pantry. The footage showed Ava rummaging through the pantry, pulling out Liam's snacks and tearing open a bag of chips. Moments later, Liam walked into the kitchen and saw her. He approached her hesitantly, his voice polite but firm. "Ava, those are my snacks. Can you please not eat them?" he asked. Ava's response was immediate and dismissive. "Mom says I can have whatever I want. You don't get to tell me anything." Kelly entered the frame seconds later, holding her phone. She glanced at the scene, her expression indifferent. Ava looked at her and smirked, as if seeking backup. Kelly chuckled and said, "Don't be so selfish, Liam. Sharing won't kill you." Liam looked down, visibly trying to hold back his frustration. He turned and left the kitchen without another word. Ava continued eating, her smugness almost unbearable to watch. My heart broke for Liam. His kindness, his willingness to be respectful, all dismissed like they meant nothing. But the worst moment came the following day. Liam had a favorite hoodie, one that his late mother had given him. It was worn but cherished, a tangible connection to her memory. The footage showed Ava using the hoodie to clean up a spill on the floor. Liam walked into the living room and froze when he saw what she was doing. "Ava, stop!" he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "That's my hoodie. It's really important to me." Ava looked at him and laughed. "It's just a stupid hoodie. Get over it." Liam rushed forward to take the hoodie from her, but before he could, Kelly appeared. She surveyed the scene, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "Maybe if you didn't leave your things lying around, this wouldn't happen," she said, her tone cold and mocking. Liam clutched the hoodie to his chest, tears welling up in his eyes. As he turned to walk away, Kelly grabbed his arm roughly. "I told you to stop whining, didn't I?" she snapped. "Go to your room before I make you regret it." Liam winced, his small frame recoiling from her grip. He nodded silently and retreated to his room, his shoulders shaking as he clutched the ruined hoodie. Ava's giggles echoed in the background as Kelly turned away, unconcerned. Watching that footage felt like a punch in the face. I had known that things were bad, but this was abuse, plain and simple. The realization was almost too much to bear. That night, I sat in the dark, replaying the scenes in my head. The evidence was undeniable, but so was the pain. I made up my mind, I'm going through with the divorce. This isn't a healthy family for either my son or I, and I need to take action immediately, don't you think? Update. Hey everyone, it's been a while since my last post, and I've been meaning to update you. Things have escalated, and honestly, I took a long, hard look at the situation with Kelly and Ava, and I realized I couldn't wait any longer to act. So, here's what happened. The day I confronted Kelly with the videos was one of the hardest and most liberating moments of my life. I waited until Liam was at school and Ava was out with a friend. Kelly was in the living room, scrolling on her phone like nothing was wrong. My heart was pounding, but I knew I had to stay calm and stick to the facts. "Kelly," I started, holding the folder where I'd printed screenshots from the footage. "We need to talk. Now." She looked up, annoyed. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something." "No," I said firmly, sitting down across from her. "It can't." I handed her the folder, and she opened it reluctantly. As she flipped through the screenshots, Ava snatching Liam's book, her mocking him about the snacks, and the incident with the hoodie, her expression barely changed. When she got to the part where she grabbed Liam's arm and snapped at him, she tossed the folder onto the coffee table. "So what's your point?" she said, crossing her arms. I stared at her, stunned. "My point? Kelly, this is abuse. You and Ava have been treating Liam like an outsider, like he doesn't even belong in his own home. This isn't just favoritism, it's cruelty." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Kids fight all the time. Liam needs to toughen up. And if you're upset about me disciplining him, maybe you should step up more as a parent." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Disciplining him? Kelly, you were mocking him, encouraging Ava to humiliate him. You laughed when she used his late mother's hoodie to clean a spill. Do you even hear yourself right now? I didn't wait to even hear her answer. That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no saving this. Any lingering hope I had that she could change, that she cared about this family, evaporated. I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. You're done here, Kelly, I said, my voice cold. You and Ava need to pack your things and leave. Today. She laughed, as if I'd just told a joke. Excuse me? You're kicking us out of my house? My house, I corrected her. I pay the mortgage, the bills, everything. And after what you've done to Liam, you don't deserve to live here. Her expression shifted, her entitlement turning into fury. You can't just kick us out. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said. I'll give you a week to figure it out. But you're not staying here any longer. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. She stood up, shouting at me about how unfair I was being, how she'd sacrificed so much for this family. I didn't engage. I just repeated myself. You have a week. Pack your things. Update. Hey everyone, I'm back with another update. I've been meaning to write this for a while, but life has been chaotic since I started the divorce process. Honestly, I thought kicking Kelly and Ava out of the house would be the hardest part, but I was wrong. The real fight started when the paperwork hit her hands. After Kelly moved out, I filed for divorce immediately. My lawyer helped me outline everything. The finances, custody of the house, and of course, ensuring Liam's safety was the top priority. I had hoped Kelly would take the hint and move on quietly. We both knew the relationship was irreparably broken, but instead, she came back swinging, and not in a good way. The first inkling of trouble came when I got served with her response to the divorce petition. Kelly was demanding half of everything: the house, the savings, the cars, even a portion of my retirement fund. She also claimed she was entitled to spousal support because she had sacrificed so much to be in this marriage. I almost laughed when I read it. Sacrificed? All I could think about was the evidence I had of her mistreatment of Liam. If anyone had sacrificed anything, it was my son. But Kelly wasn't done. She lawyered up with someone who clearly knew how to play dirty. They started making accusations, claiming I was an absentee father and that Kelly had been the primary caregiver for both kids. It was absurd. She'd never cared for Liam, and Ava had been her priority since day one. But in divorce court, accusations like that can stick if you don't have solid evidence to refute them. That's when I remembered the videos. My lawyer was thrilled when I told her about the footage. She said it could be a game changer, but we had to present it carefully. The recordings showed not only Kelly's indifference, but also her outright cruelty toward Liam. They captured Ava's bullying and Kelly's enabling behavior, as well as the heartbreaking moment where Kelly grabbed Liam's arm and threatened him. When Kelly's lawyer saw that we intended to use the footage, they tried to argue that the recordings were an invasion of privacy, but my lawyer shut that down quickly, citing that the cameras were placed in common areas, not private spaces, and were installed for Liam's safety. The judge allowed the evidence, and suddenly Kelly's narrative started falling apart. The courtroom was tense when the videos were played. I'll never forget the look on Kelly's face as the footage rolled. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her usual smugness replaced with unease. Her lawyer tried to downplay it, arguing that it was out of context and that Kelly was just disciplining Liam. But there was no way to sugarcoat the way she laughed when Ava humiliated him, or how coldly she dismissed his pleas. The judge didn't buy it. In fact, they seemed disgusted by what they saw. I could feel the tide turning in my favor. Kelly didn't take it well. After that hearing, she doubled down on making my life as difficult as possible. She started spreading rumors, telling anyone who would listen that I was the abusive one, that I had brainwashed Liam against her. Some of her family members even reached out to me, accusing me of being heartless for breaking up the family. It was infuriating, but I kept my head down and focused on the legal process. The financial battle was the next hurdle. Kelly was still pushing for half of everything, despite the fact that she had never contributed financially to the household. Her lawyer argued that she deserved spousal support because she had been dependent on me during our marriage. My lawyer countered with the videos, showing that Kelly's behavior had contributed to the breakdown of the marriage and that she had failed to fulfill even the basic duties of a partner and stepmother. The judge sided with me on most counts. Kelly didn't get the house or the majority of our savings. She walked away with a smaller settlement than she had demanded, and no spousal support. The court recognized that her behavior toward Liam was not only harmful, but also a significant factor in the divorce. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was truly in my corner. But the best part? Liam is safe now. The court granted me full custody of him, which means Kelly has no legal claim to him or the house. That was my biggest fear, that she would somehow try to use Liam as leverage, even though she had never cared about him. Now she can't hurt him anymore. Thank you to everyone who encouraged me to take that first step. Your advice and support gave me the courage to do what needed to be done. If you're out there, reading this and feeling trapped in a toxic situation, please know that there's a way out. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Liam and I are proof of that. Update. Hey everyone, I'm back with an update. Let's hope it's the last one and you and I stop hearing about Kelly ever again. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I started hearing rumblings through mutual acquaintances and even a few nosy neighbors. Apparently, Kelly wasn't doing so well living with her sister. Initially, I didn't pay much attention. I was focused on moving forward with my life and helping Liam adjust to our new normal. But then, Kelly started reaching out. It started with a few texts. At first, they seemed innocent enough. Basic questions about Ava's schoolwork or her belongings that were still at the house. I responded politely, keeping things short and professional. But it didn't take long for the tone of her messages to shift. The texts started coming more frequently, and they weren't just about Ava anymore. Kelly began reminiscing about our marriage, saying things like, "I didn't realize how good I had it, and I missed the life we had together." I ignored most of these messages, but then came the emails. In one particularly long email, Kelly poured her heart out. Well, at least that's what she wanted me to believe. She wrote about how hard things had been since the divorce, how her sister was impossible to live with, and how Ava was struggling in school because of all the changes. She even tried to tug at my heartstrings, claiming that Ava missed me and Liam and wanted to see us again. It was an obvious attempt to guilt me, but I wasn't buying it. From what I'd heard, Kelly's sister wasn't thrilled about having 2 new house guests. Kelly had always been high maintenance, and now that she didn't have me as a financial safety net, the cracks in her life were starting to show. She'd never had to budget or worry about bills before, and apparently, the reality of living without a provider was hitting her hard. Ava, meanwhile, wasn't adjusting well to the lack of luxury she'd grown accustomed to. The constant tension in their new living arrangement was clearly taking a toll, but that wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, Kelly called me. I stared at the screen for a moment before declining the call. Seconds later, she texted a period. "Can we please talk? Just for a few minutes." Against my better judgment, I decided to reply. "What do you want, Kelly?" Her response came almost immediately. "I just want to apologize. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I realize now how much I took for granted. I made mistakes, and I want to make things right." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. This wasn't about making things right. This was about her realizing she couldn't handle the life she had created for herself. I decided to call her bluff. "What exactly do you want to make right?" I replied. "The way you treated Liam? The way you let Ava bully him? Or is this just about the fact that you don't have someone footing the bill for you anymore?" Her reply was defensive. "That's not fair. I know I wasn't perfect, but I did the best I could. I miss the life we had. Don't you?" I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I blocked her number. It was clear that she hadn't truly changed. She was just desperate. Desperate for the comfort and stability she had lost, and likely desperate for someone to shoulder her responsibilities again. But I wasn't going to be that person anymore. Over the next few days, Kelly tried other ways to get in contact. She emailed me from a different address, showed up at Liam's school claiming she wanted to check on him, and even sent a message through one of her friends. Each time I shut it down. I made it clear that we were done, that she had made her choices and would have to live with them. Now, a few months later, Kelly's attempts to reconcile have slowed down, though I wouldn't be surprised if she tried again. From what I've heard, she's still struggling, bouncing between jobs and relying heavily on her sister. Ava is reportedly acting out, which doesn't surprise me considering how she was raised. As much as I feel sorry for them, I know it's not my place to fix their lives. My priority is Liam and making sure he grows up in a loving, stable environment. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, let me say this. People like Kelly rarely change. They might realize what they've lost, but that doesn't mean they're ready to take accountability or truly make amends. Thanks to y'all for following along with my story. Your comments helped me a lot throughout the past period.
When I was 12, my parents sent me to live with my uncle in the countryside. They thought I was a burden and preferred raising my twin sister, who they believed was more capable. She really was cleverer than me, and I couldn't keep up. In a family of overachievers, being average just didn't cut it. Both my parents were doctors and wanted my sister and me to follow in their footsteps, but I was more interested in creative endeavors than academics. Despite my efforts, I wasn't doing well in school. My parents didn't encourage me. Instead, they constantly compared me to my sister and insulted me. This treatment started early and worsened over time, making it hard for me to concentrate. By middle school, my grades were so poor that I was failing most classes. My teachers didn't understand what was happening at home and thought I was lazy. At school, people compared me to my brilliant sister, making things even harder. I cried myself to sleep every night as my parents praised my sister and reminded me of how disappointed they were in me. One night, after being insulted about my grades at dinner, I lashed out. My parents grounded me for 2 weeks, and I decided to run away from home without knowing where I was going. To go obviously, I couldn't get very far. I only made it to the nearby park, where I sat alone, terrified in the dark. They found me there around 5 a.m. with the help of the cops. After they brought me back home, they decided to send me to my uncle's house in the countryside. When my parents told me, I begged them not to do it. I promised I'd be better and never disappoint them again or try to run away. But they didn't care. They said I had let them down too many times, and they couldn't handle it anymore. They had another child to take care of, one who wasn't useless like me. They mostly fawned over my sister, barely paying attention to me unless it was to make fun of my poor grades. I kept pleading with them not to send me away because I didn't want to be separated from my sister, the only person in the family who was nice to me. But they didn't listen. They made me say goodbye to my sister and didn't even let her come with me on the ride to my uncle's house. Once I got there, I couldn't stop crying for weeks. I just wanted to go home. I tried calling my parents, but they ignored my calls. My uncle and aunt were really supportive and understanding, but it didn't help that my parents refused to talk to me. After a few weeks, I decided to accept my fate and make peace with it. I stayed in touch with my sister in secret. She didn't have a cell phone, so I had to call her from my uncle's home phone whenever our parents were away. Social media was just getting popular, and she used the computer to talk to me occasionally. Whenever my sister would tell me the coast was clear, I'd call her and we'd finally get to talk. My sister and I are still in touch. We love each other, and that's how it's always going to be. She keeps me updated on what's going on with her and our parents. A couple of weeks ago, she told me our parents were planning to reach out to me, so I was able to prepare myself mentally. For the past 10 years, I've had no contact with my parents. Initially, they refused to get in touch with me or even speak to me after dropping me off at my uncle's house. After a couple of years there, I decided I didn't want to reach out to them either. They had abandoned me, and that was the end of it. Living with my uncle and aunt was much better. They didn't put me under the kind of pressure my parents did, and I started doing better at school. I was still an average student, not the straightest student my sister always was, but at least I wasn't flunking all my classes. My uncle and aunt also allowed me to take part in activities like school plays and sports, which my parents had forbidden because they thought it would affect my grades. I was living life to the fullest and was very happy with them. When I lived with my parents, I was also forbidden from talking to boys because they thought it would distract me. My uncle and aunt had no such ridiculous restrictions and allowed me to talk to whoever I wanted and bring friends home. Coincidentally, that's how I met my husband, who has been there for me all along. We've been together for the past 6 years, starting in high school and sticking together ever since. We even went to the same college. I graduated last year, and just a week after our graduation, we got married in an intimate ceremony. Last month, I gave birth to our son. I no longer live with my uncle and aunt. My husband and I have our own house a few streets away from them. We visit each other frequently, especially now to see our son. I'm currently on maternity leave, so I have a few more weeks before I need to go back to work. My sister and I have been openly in touch for the past few years. When she turned 18, she decided she didn't need to hide our bond from our parents anymore. She was my maid of honor at the wedding and is the godmother to my child. Last week, while visiting, she told me our parents were planning to visit me. They didn't know I was married or had a baby since everyone stopped talking to them after they abandoned me. My sister never felt it necessary to update them about my life, even when they asked. After 10 years, our parents finally seemed to feel some regret and wanted to reach out. My sister thought it was her duty to inform me so I could decide how to respond and not be caught off guard. A couple of days after her visit, my parents did reach out through social media asking if they could visit. They didn't apologize for anything, it was just a plain message from both of them. I was a bit disappointed by their message because I expected at least an apology for how they treated me in the past. For a moment, I felt so angry that I considered not responding at all. But then I had a better idea. I decided to invite my parents over to show them how well I was doing without them. I gave them my address and invited them for dinner on the weekend. I also invited my uncle, aunt, and sister. Naturally, my husband and son would be there since we were hosting the dinner at our house. I didn't tell my uncle and aunt that my parents would be there, so everyone was surprised when they showed up last weekend. This was 3 days ago, and I still don't know if it was the right decision. Once everyone arrived, things were pretty awkward. I hadn't seen my parents in 10 years, and the whole family had cut them off, including my uncle and aunt. My parents had promised to support me financially while I lived with my uncle and to stay in touch to meet my emotional needs. They did send money every month but didn't bother to keep in touch and were just glad to be rid of me. My uncle was upset that my parents abandoned me emotionally but didn't mind taking care of me. He stood up for me and told the rest of the family what my parents were doing, leading everyone to cut them off. My dad continued to send money until I turned 18, and after that, there was no contact. After greeting each other, we were supposed to have dinner, but I decided to make a toast first. As if things weren't awkward enough, I wanted my parents to feel sorry and regretful. I got up and started making a speech about how wonderful the last 10 years of my life had been compared to the first 12. I directed my speech to my uncle and aunt, because they had done so much for me over the past decade. Honestly, I don't think I would have made it this far without them. I also thanked my husband for being with me through everything and my sister for never giving up on me despite everything that happened. I deliberately snubbed my parents in my speech because I had nothing to thank them for. They noticed, keeping their eyes downcast and silent throughout my speech. After finishing my speech, I decided to rub it in even more by turning to my parents and telling them I was finally ready to introduce them to my new family. They were shocked when I announced this. My mother burst into tears and ran out. The whole situation was dramatic and heavy. After they left, we had a very awkward and quiet dinner. No one stayed for dessert, and I was glad because it felt too heavy. I didn't like my parents, but I knew I had gone too far. I haven't had a chance to speak to my uncle and aunt yet, but my sister and husband think I overstepped and should have just ignored my parents' messages if I didn't want to interact with them. They believe insulting them was unnecessary. Am I the jerk for inviting my parents over for dinner and then humiliating them? Update 1. The comments have been divided on whether I should apologize to my parents, but everyone agrees that I should talk to my uncle and aunt. Since opinions are mixed about my parents, I decided to contact my uncle today. It's been a week since the dinner, and we hadn't talked much due to being busy and the lingering awkwardness. I called my uncle and immediately apologized for inviting my parents without giving them a heads up. He admitted he was shocked, but eventually got over it. He hadn't reached out because he wasn't sure how I was feeling after that night. He agreed it was awkward, but assured me it was water under the bridge. I then called my aunt and apologized to her as well, and she had a similar reaction. Now that I've apologized to both of them, I don't feel as guilty anymore. Personally, I don't feel like I owe my parents an apology after everything they put me through in my childhood. I don't think anyone would feel sorry for how I acted. My parents haven't apologized to me, so I don't see why I should apologize. I talked to my husband about it since he thought I should apologize. I explained that even though my actions at the dinner were uncalled for, the way I was treated in the past was unacceptable too. He understood my perspective and didn't push the issue. I told my sister the same thing. She was a bit skeptical, but ultimately said it was my decision. I was the one wronged, so whatever I decided was fair. She hasn't been able to contact our parents for the past week since they've been unusually quiet. I assume they're just laying low for now, but I expect them to reach out again and possibly create some drama. Update 2. I want to clarify that my sister isn't trying to be diplomatic by maintaining a good relationship with our parents. Even if she is, I'm fine with it. Please don't make a big deal out of it in the comments. She knows what they did to me was wrong, but she was very young at the time and couldn't have done much. She kept in touch with me, and that's enough. She's still in contact with our parents because they're getting older, and she doesn't want to feel guilty for abandoning them. It's not that deep, so please don't accuse her of anything. We have a lot of love between us, and the negative comments about her are unjustified. As I mentioned in my last update, I was pretty sure my parents wouldn't take what I did kindly. They're not the type to let things go easily, so I expected some retaliation. Today, 10 days after the dinner, they went public with the incident on social media. This surprised me because they aren't usually active online, but they decided to post about this. As expected, it was a one-sided post where they only talked about how hurt they were, without mentioning anything they had done in the past. I honestly wouldn't have cared about the post if it had been directed at our family members. No one in my family likes my parents because they abandoned me. But they were clever and tagged my coworkers and my husband's coworkers, even though he had nothing to do with this fiasco. My coworkers weren't aware of my history with my parents, so they were shocked when they got tagged in the post. They started blowing up my phone almost immediately. Since I'm on maternity leave, I didn't know about the post right away because I don't check social media often. I'm usually busy with my son. When I finally saw the messages and checked the post, I was shocked and didn't know how to react. I realized my parents had probably stalked me online, finding my coworkers' accounts through pictures I had posted and tagged. They must have spent the past week figuring out who my friends at work were to ruin my reputation. After the initial shock, I decided to comment and explain the reality of the situation. I had nothing to hide. I was the victim. What happened at the dinner was uncalled for, but not unjustified. I typed out the entire story, detailing how my parents had dropped me off at my uncle's house years ago and refused to keep in touch. Even when they reached out recently, they hadn't apologized. If they had, I might have reconsidered what I said at the dinner. I also clarified the situation to my coworkers who had been tagged, apologizing on behalf of my parents because they didn't deserve to get caught up in our drama. It was ridiculous for my parents to drag them into this mess. I'm obviously very angry because my parents could have just targeted me, but dragging my coworkers into it was below the belt and unacceptable. I'm waiting for my husband to get home. I didn't want to bother my husband at work because he had an important client meeting. Otherwise, I might have contacted him about this. Honestly, it's just petty drama, and I can handle it on my own. I've already spoken to my sister, and she thinks our parents are acting crazy. They probably couldn't handle the disrespect and completely lost it. Even so, nothing justifies their behavior. I haven't told my uncle or aunt because I'm sure they'll have strong reactions, and I don't want to trouble them since they're busy with work. Update 3. A few hours have passed since my last update. It's 8 p.m. now, and everyone is at my house. My uncle, aunt, sister, and my husband, who's back from work. We're trying to figure out how to deal with this situation. I don't want to go to a lawyer like some of you suggested. I don't have the time or energy for a legal battle. I prefer to handle this personally and keep lawyers out of it as long as possible. If my parents refuse to take down the post, I might have to contact an attorney and file a defamation lawsuit or whatever is appropriate. For now, we're trying our best to have them remove it. So far, we've all texted them, asking them to take it down, but they haven't responded or cared. At least they haven't deleted my comment, so everyone who sees the post will also see the truth. Unfortunately, the post is gaining traction, which isn't good for me. It's not just my coworkers who have seen it, but also some acquaintances who are now asking me about it. I don't know how it showed up on their feeds, probably because I was tagged in the post, but I've removed the tag and it's still showing up. There must be a glitch with the app, but it's frustrating. People are asking me about it, and I'm tired of answering their questions. They could just read my comment, but for some reason, they feel the need to reach out to me personally. People keep asking me about it repeatedly, and it's getting really annoying. I just want this to blow over. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that HR doesn't contact me because that could spell trouble. I really don't want to ruin my reputation at work because of my parents. Right now, my family and I are trying to figure out a way to get them to take the post down, but they're not responding. Tomorrow, my sister is going to visit my parents and ask them to take it down in person. If they still refuse, we'll have no other option but to get a lawyer involved. I really hope it doesn't come to that because it would be a lot of work. I just want to spend time with my son during my maternity leave, not deal with their shenanigans. Update 4. My sister visited my parents today for an hour. She told me they were very upset, which is why they made the post and tagged my coworkers. As I guessed, they found my coworkers' social media accounts by stalking me online. That's creepy, but it's the least of my concerns right now. She had a long discussion with them, and they said they would take the post down if I apologized first. I told my sister that's a no from me because I didn't do anything wrong. Thankfully, she knew I wouldn't apologize and told my parents I wouldn't pretend to be sorry for something I didn't do. She warned them that if they didn't take the post down, we'd get a lawyer involved. After almost an hour of discussion, my parents decided to take the post down. However, they also told my sister to tell me that they are cutting me out of their lives and inheritance. I don't care about any of that. I just want the post taken down. They can keep their inheritance. It holds no importance to me. My husband and I are doing well in our careers, and we know we're on track to be successful. Even if we don't become rich, I'm fine with that because at least I don't have to rely on my parents for money. My sister also made sure to tell them how I feel about this so they're aware. Now that this situation is dealt with, I'm going to focus on enjoying the rest of my maternity leave with my son. I want to make the most of this time before I go back to work. Thank you all so much for the support you've shown me.
I launched my catering business because I've always believed in creating opportunities for myself. A full-service catering firm that started off as a small food truck when I was in college has grown into a workforce of more than 50 people and provides catering for extravagant events all around the Chicago area. I have put in many hours, given up a lot, and been incredibly determined to succeed in order to reach this point. I finally accomplished my goal after nearly 10 years of hard work. In order to comprehend the complete and utter catastrophe that was my younger brother Mark's wedding last weekend, it is necessary to have some background information. For background, it's been almost 6 years since my family and I hadn't spoken. At the age of 14, my mother passed away, and my father remarried to Jenny, who is now my stepmother, within a year. From the very beginning, Jenny made it plain that she did not want any trace of my mom. There was a lot of friction between my parents because my father was so ready to move on that he gave her permission to erase all mention of my mother from our lives. Although my 10-year-old brother Mark became close to Jenny, I found it difficult to adjust to her abrupt and domineering presence in our household. My father and I began to grow apart at that point. During my time as a college student, I hit rock bottom. My dad insisted I needed to learn responsibility. Therefore, he wouldn't give me money even though I was working many jobs to cover my school expenses. All the while, he was paying for Mark to attend a posh private institution. There was a glaring disparity in the way we were handled. Jenny, who was always looking for a reason to put her condescending attitude on display, would find a way to undermine my catering business whenever she could. To her, it was just playing with a food truck, and she was quick to compliment Mark on his real job in finance. We lost touch once we graduated from college. The only time you could count on me was during holidays. The last nail in the coffin was when I found out, 6 years ago, that my dad and Jenny had secretly sold the house where I grew up. I didn't find out until after they had relocated, and by then, anything I had wished to retain from my mother's possessions had already been taken. I went to my dad with my feelings, and he told me I needed to stop being such a baby and get over it. I made the decision to go no contact at that point. Now let's go to last month. A formal invitation to Mark's wedding arrived in my mailbox out of the blue. He had prepared a note to express his longing for our relationship and his desire to mend our broken bond, which was sent with the invitation. Lots of deliberation led me to the conclusion that it was worth a shot. I decided it was worthwhile to attend even if our family history was a red flag. As a show of goodwill, I even offered to supply the wedding's catering at a steep discount. However, Mark graciously declined, stating that they had previously hired another firm. I felt a twinge of pain, but I ignored it. I'd approached the wedding with a cautious sense of optimism because the location in Lake Forest was so picturesque. As a relief, Mark appeared genuinely pleased to see me, but Jenny's demeanor remained unchanged. As soon as she laid eyes on me, she began making derogatory remarks about my look and my catering company. The ceremony was stunning, but I tried to ignore it and focus on enjoying myself. But the way the family sat down said it all. As if to subtly remind me that I was still an outsider, my cousins, who I barely knew, were seated at the same table as me, far away from my own relatives. During the reception, things went downhill rapidly. Somehow, my visibly intoxicated father found his way to my table and began scolding me without warning. Claiming I was a shame on the family, he made a strong accusation that I had shown up uninvited, even though I had a valid invitation with me. Jenny interrupted him before I could answer, saying that my presence was spoiling Mark's special day. She inquired, with a hint of irony, how much money I was making playing restaurant owner right now. She went so far as to say something about my suit, as if to suggest that I was unable to purchase such a high-quality item. The sheer brazenness of it was astounding. I opted to silently depart instead of responding or saying anything. With my father inebriated and Jenny obviously relishing the chance to insult me, I realized there was no use in getting involved with them. I noticed the caterers preparing the main dish as I made my way to my vehicle. Several of them were my employees, so I knew they were right away. I was taken aback by that. My company had just acquired the catering company that my business partner had contracted for the wedding. I wasn't actively involved in the planning because the previous owner had continued on as a manager. In a legal sense, though, I was now in charge of the business and the situation. To back up my suspicions, I contacted my operations manager. It was our event, I can assure you. Recalling my father's words, I realized that my presence at the wedding was detracting from its joyous occasion. And with that, I came to a conclusion. I would think they would also reject my catering services if they found my very presence repugnant. Immediately, I told my employees to get all of their belongings and depart. My staff of 25 was back in our vehicles, restocking with food, tools, and supplies, within 15 minutes. Not long after that, 300 people were left without their entrees or desserts, and mayhem ensued. A major problem began to emerge, and people began to notice. There was nothing my dad could do when he tried to step in. They agreed to a provision in the contract with the former caterer's owner that gave us the right to cancel service in the event of discrimination or unfriendly treatment of our employees or owners, and we were able to exercise that right. I advised the venue manager to have my father get in touch with my attorney in the event that there were any disagreements regarding the payment, and I left my business card with her. There was an instant repercussion. My phone was inundated with texts from relatives accusing me of being self-centered and trivial by the following morning. Mark confirmed Jenny was correct about me when he sent me a lengthy text claiming I had ruined his wedding. As expected, my dad threatened to sue me over a broken agreement. Their messages were forwarded to my attorney, and I banned their numbers. A few hours down the road, I began to get messages from some of the wedding's attendees. To my surprise, I had support from a few of them. My parents' actions towards me were seen by them, and they expressed their disgust at what my father and Jenny did. Even Mark's friend, who had previously seen the work of my catering company, contacted me to express regret for the outcome. He complimented my team's professionalism and efficiency in responding to the crisis. Though I hadn't anticipated it, this encouragement served as a reminder that not all relatives had chosen to ignore the truth. The details of Mark's wedding, especially its aftermath, had been circulating in social circles for some time, as I learned as the days progressed. The drama that unfolded had apparently made its way among Mark's friends and coworkers. Quickly, Jenny's meticulously maintained persona began to crumble. Jenny attempted to minimize the situation and blamed me for destroying the reception, according to several mutual acquaintances. But word got out, and nobody believed her account of what happened. There was already damage. After giving it some thought, I still don't feel sorry about what happened. Neither did I cause a commotion or crash their wedding. Aside from the obvious lack of respect, I was also invited. I used my right to cancel service, and they proceeded to embarrass me. Everything was professional and not personal. Since they were against my presence, they were also denied my services. That is all. No matter how much I try, I just can't seem to escape the entanglement of a family feud that I had wished to put in the past. I don't know if I handled it correctly now. Was that too much, or were they justified in their treatment of me? Whatever the case may be, I've been feeling overwhelmed by everything and am seeking some perspective on Reddit. Am I acting reasonably, or is this an ATA situation? The first upgrade, much obliged for the tremendous outpouring of support. I am truly touched by the overwhelming amount of intelligent comments and positive feedback. Yet, I was not anticipating the story's level of popularity. I have attempted to reply to as many of the comments and mails as possible, but the sheer volume has been too much. Thank you so much for the thoughtful comments. I've learned a lot from hearing other points of view during this whole mess. Many people have wanted to know how this is going to play out in court and if my dad and Jenny want to sue me. Yes, as I had expected, they did threaten to sue. What has transpired subsequent to my initial post is detailed here. I contacted my lawyer immediately following the wedding disaster in order to head off any possible legal complications. Mark or his wedding planner signed a contract between my catering company and the former owner of the firm. We reviewed it. The deal is really firm, which is wonderful news. It includes a provision that grants us the right to discontinue service in the event that our employees or owners are subjected to unfriendly or discriminatory treatment. Things may easily spiral out of hand in this kind of scenario, which is why that clause was included. I contacted the manager of the facility to make sure we were ready, and he assured me that the surveillance cameras had caught every moment. In spite of some audio issues, the video clearly shows my dad coming towards me, and I can confirm that he was scolding me. Their aggressive behavior was enough justified to warrant the decision to stop catering the event. Given Jenny's snarky remarks were also captured on tape. Now that I had this proof, I knew I was in a strong position legally. My father's attorney was informed of the issue by a formal letter that my lawyer sent a few days following the wedding. The facts were brought out with an emphasis on how the contract permitted us to end services as a result of their aggressive conduct. We were even forthright about our willingness to offer the video proof if asked for it, and we brought it up. My naivete led me to believe that would be the last of Jenny's obstinacy and vindictiveness. A response requesting a complete reimbursement for the food was sent yesterday by my father's attorney. In addition, they mentioned the possibility of a lawsuit claiming that I had damaged the wedding and its guests irreparably by canceling the food. They wanted money back for the food and the trouble it made the occasion go off without a hitch. To be honest, I had no intention of giving in to their demands. I had no intention of paying them anything, particularly because they were the ones responsible for causing this situation first. I consulted with my attorney before deciding to submit a counterproposal. Half of the deposit can be refunded, but there are two requirements. Signing a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, is the first step, which prevents them from discussing the matter in public or posting critical reviews online. Second, in order to stop them from going after me or my business in court, they need to sign a release of claim. The offer has been sent, and all that remains is for them to respond. Jenny has already attempted to make trouble, despite all this legal maneuvering. Just a few days ago, I received a call from the venue manager informing me that Jenny had been trying to find ways to criticize my catering firm online. She wrote in her evaluations that we had ruined a wedding and exaggerated the situation to bring shame on the family. Still, dealing with her was a pain, even when the venue manager blocked her attempts. We will elevate the matter as defamation if Jenny persists in spreading false information. My legal team is closely monitoring the issue. Despite all the mayhem, my business has actually benefited from the wedding. After the wedding, some of the guests contacted us to say how great my team was and to inquire about potential future events. They were amazed by how swiftly and efficiently my staff left, according to a few of them. Despite how bizarre it looks, new economic opportunities may emerge as a result of this catastrophe. Though he did communicate with me via a relative we share, my brother Mark has yet to reach out to me personally. Mark acknowledged in the message that he was ashamed of himself for being weak-kneed at the wedding. He explained his silence during the heated exchange by saying he didn't want to upset our father or Jenny. He expressed regret and wanted to know if we could meet to discuss the situation. Regarding this, I feel conflicted. It seems like it's already too late to offer him an opportunity to explain, but I still want to. Until the legal matter is completely settled, I will refrain from scheduling any meetings at this time. At my own level, I've been giving a lot of thought to what has transpired. I guess I should be proud of myself for sticking up for what I believe in. After years of feeling like an outsider by my family, I eventually made a decision. From a professional and legal standpoint, I am confident in my conclusions. Nonetheless, dealing with this scenario has been emotionally taxing. Even though my father and Jenny have been far from me for a long time, it's still impossible not to feel sad. Instead of being a joyous occasion, Mark's wedding has devolved into a contentious court dispute and an unwelcome source of family strife. Everything is beginning to hit you like a ton of bricks. What this means for my connections with my extended family in the future is something I don't know. How long till everything returns to normal? Is there any way we can mend our relationship, or is it too far gone? It will take some time for me to figure everything out, and I still don't know the answers to those questions. Seeing how my dad and Jenny react to our proposition is my current priority. Maybe this whole ordeal will end if they sign the non-disclosure agreement and release any claims. I am ready to defend my business and myself in court if they refuse to budge and go ahead with the lawsuit. I will ensure that I keep you all informed regardless of the outcome. As always, I appreciate your words of encouragement and support. Particularly at this difficult and uncertain time, it means a great deal to me. Revision 2. The situation has only worsened since my last report, but I have finally finished with the legal aspect. I need to tell you something I just learned, so let me back up a bit before we get into that. An additional piece of information regarding the events leading up to the wedding was provided to me by a business associate of mine who had connections with the wedding planner that Mark and Jenny had engaged. It seems the mayhem hadn't begun to simmer for weeks before my arrival. It had been building for quite some time. Jenny, according to my colleague, was a pain to work with right from the start. Even though she had already given her approval, she proceeded to insist on making multiple last-minute adjustments to the floral arrangements. Almost every detail was a point of contention between her and the event coordinator. Due to Jenny's indecision, the wedding cake design was changed no less than 3 times. Even in the days leading up to the big event, she insisted on a total rethinking of the seating chart. Not only was it inconvenient, but it also cost the event planner a pretty penny to reseat more than 300 attendees. Plus, Jenny's relationship with the venue workers was fraught with conflict. Jenny apparently complained that their professionalism wasn't up to pace for a high-end wedding and made a number of condescending comments about it. The venue was famous for its first-rate service, and the personnel was among the greatest in the industry, so this was ironic. Even though Mark and his fiancée had carefully selected all the music months before the event, Jenny nevertheless attempted to change the set list at the last minute. Everyone involved was in for a nightmare during the planning process since Jenny was so involved, just like in those classic cases. According to my colleague, the event planner appeared to be about to quit in the days leading up to the wedding due to Jenny's incessant interference and unreasonable demands. Despite the mental and emotional toll Jenny's actions were putting on the whole team, the planner remained professional and continued working through it. A small sense of vindication washed over me when my associate informed me of this. Clearly, the vendors had been dealing with a lot more than what I had experienced at the wedding reception in terms of anxiety and confusion in the weeks preceding up to the big day. We return to the legal issues now. The attorney representing my father finally got in touch with us yesterday, and they've accepted the amount we offered. They chose to sign the non-disclosure agreement, NDA, and get a partial refund after what seemed like a lengthy conversation between my dad, Jenny, and their legal staff. They completed all the required paperwork this morning, and we refunded them half of their deposit after deducting the expenses for food, staff, and transportation. This concludes the legal conflict. Although I wasn't anticipating an apology or acknowledgement of the actual events in the lawyer's official letter, I was disappointed none was included. The fact that they consented to the settlement means that I am free from their potential legal consequences. Although the legal issue has been resolved, the human consequences have still to be addressed and are only becoming worse. Among the more worrisome developments is Jenny's persistent attempt to discredit my company ever since the wedding. She has been contacting multiple people on my staff in an effort to learn more about how my business runs. Fortunately, my devoted crew is aware of the gravity of this situation and knows better than to interact with her. Everyone on staff has been told to forward any messages originating from my family to our legal department. It goes on from there, though. Some of my business associates have also been contacted by Jenny on LinkedIn, who has circulated malicious rumors about my character and accused me of intentionally derail her son's wedding. Attempting to destroy someone's livelihood is a very different ballgame than just being furious. These efforts by Jenny to discredit me were really offensive. Our lawyer promptly sent her with a cease and desist letter upon learning of her actions. Now that her behavior is getting dangerously close to defamation, we are treating this seriously. I am crossing my fingers that the cease and desist order will be sufficient to deter her, but my legal team is prepared to take matters to the next level if required. Jenny has a history of pushing limits, so I wouldn't be surprised if she keeps pushing. My brother Mark, though, brought about what was probably the most unexpected change. I didn't anticipate much from him following the wedding, but it appears that his own marriage has also been affected by the aftermath of the tragedy. What I've heard from cousins and other acquaintances is that Mark and his new bride have already had their first big argument about the wedding. After the wedding, she apparently confronted Mark about how our father and Jenny treated me, expressing her horror at their treatment of me. Mark should have protected me, she informed him firmly, and it was intolerable that he let his stepmother and father humiliate me. From what I understand, she thinks Mark should be brave and confront our father and Jenny. They ended up having a heated dispute over it, which caused them to delay their honeymoon until they could resolve some of the difficulties. I don't have much information beyond that, but it seems like my brother is having to face the facts, which means he has to reevaluate his connection with our dad and Jenny. A odd jumble of feelings has crept up inside of me in regards to this. Knowing that someone else recognized the event for what it really is, on the one hand, a comfort. It's comforting to know that Mark's wife shared my disgust at our parents and Jenny's actions. Contrarily, I sympathize with Mark's situation. He's in a bind, and although I'm mad at him for being weak in my defense, I also know that our family has put a lot of pressure on him for a long time. It's not an excuse, but it's a tough situation to be in, particularly now that he's married and trying to figure out how to get out of this jam. I, for one, am intent on progressing. Now that my legal team has taken care of the legal issues and Jenny's efforts to undermine my company, I am beginning to feel some relief. I'm just trying to live day by day, not knowing what the future holds for my relationship with Mark or the rest of the family. I simply want to express my gratitude for the support I've gotten from my workers, my business partners, and even some family members who have privately contacted out to offer their encouragement. Right now, it's all I can think about. For the time being, though, I'm hoping that this chapter is finally coming to an end. I will inform you if anything further occurs. Once again, I am very grateful for your help. Third update, greetings everyone. Sending best wishes to everyone. To begin, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate everyone who has reached out to me with words of encouragement, insights, and understanding since I initially published my experience. What has transpired and the surprising twists and turns my life has taken since my previous post is something I would like to discuss with you because the last week has been absolutely life-altering. I had coffee with Mark yesterday. It was a necessary, if uncomfortable, emotional rendezvous, and I wasn't sure I was prepared for it. I believe we were both aware that this discussion had been building for some time. After years of covering up Jenny's misbehavior and our father's partiality, Mark finally broke down and apologized. I could tell he was carrying a lot of weight since he was obviously distraught. I had no doubt that Mark loved me, but it was a tremendous leap for me to hear him confess that he had helped Jenny control our family dynamic. Jenny has been manipulating their family relationships for years through money, Mark revealed. He said that she had persuaded our dad to transfer much of their wealth to her, including a portion of Mark's apartment purchase. Mark was caught unawares because he had no clue what was taking place. A great deal of the friction between them was clarified by it. He felt betrayed since, all along, Jenny had been behind this mask, making him think he could direct his own life. He is now seeking advice from a financial expert in an effort to reclaim his autonomy, having become aware of the situation. His decision to do this made me proud of him. It demonstrated his readiness to go on a life-altering journey. Also, Mark informed me during our coffee meeting that he and his wife had a breakthrough. Afterwards, she reached out to me individually to inform me of some positive news. Going to couples therapy is in their future. Mark seemed to be speaking out against Jenny for the first time in his life. They want to find a new condo that is completely separate from Jenny and will be in their names alone. Hearing this was incredibly comforting. It seems like they're making some changes and reclaiming their lives, which is something I wish they keep doing. Also, Mark and his wife have planned a little vow renewal ceremony for a few months down the road. The fact that several in-laws will be sitting at the family table during the ceremony is a symbol of their efforts to reimagine the traditional family unit. I felt my heart melt upon hearing this. It seems like they're determined to start again with our family story, one that doesn't have the poison that Jenny and my dad brought into it. My dad and Jenny have surprisingly been silent since signing the non-disclosure agreement. I found out about their social ramifications in their country club circle through some mutual contacts. Evidently, they had been spreading a completely false narrative about our family to their acquaintances, casting me in a villainous light. It appears that their story is being challenged, and they are now facing the repercussions of their conduct. Strange as it seems, their own actions have put at risk the social status they so much desired. Setting boundaries with harmful relatives is something I've learned the hard way during this whole ordeal. Even though they may lead to temporary mayhem, the correct choices, such as sticking to your convictions or establishing clear boundaries, are sometimes the most difficult to make. In spite of the pushback, I've found that being true to myself has helped other relationships blossom and heal in ways I never imagined. I am appreciative of the community's backing. It helps to know that I'm not the only one dealing with toxic family relationships because so many of you have contacted out to share your stories. For those going through the same thing, I pray my experience can be an inspiration. Life is too short to be in toxic relationships, but I've learned that it's always possible to make amends with people who genuinely apologize. Keeping my distance from Jenny and my dad is something I intend to do in the future. They've shown me their real colors, and I'm not interested in getting back into that dynamic. On the other hand, I'm hopeful, though cautiously so, that we can mend fences and get back together with Mark and the rest of the family. Now that Mark understands the need of setting better boundaries, I believe we have a chance to reconnect. My company is thriving despite the wedding incident, which was a major setback. Prospective customers were so captivated by the mayhem that they contacted me multiple times. There has been an uptick in reservations because word of our stellar reputation has spread throughout the neighborhood. Knowing that my years of hard work are finally paying off and that my company is reaping the benefits of my devotion is a satisfying feeling. I also met with my staff to go over what had happened. I wanted to make sure they felt appreciated and encouraged for being so professional throughout a difficult event. It was touching to hear their feedback. As a leader, I was pleased of myself when many people remarked on how much they valued the robust business culture we had created. Treating people well and creating a nice work atmosphere are two things that it reaffirmed for me. My limits with Jenny and my father will remain intact. Thank you to those who inquired about upcoming family gatherings. However, I am eager to investigate the prospect of renewing relationships with Mark and other members of the family who are prepared to engage with each other politely. I'm optimistic, but it's a tightrope to walk. Relationships that bring me misery and despair have no place in this fleeting existence. Instead, I want to surround myself with supportive, happy people. Many thanks for the constant encouragement, accolades, and thoughtful remarks. To put it simply, they have meant the world to me. Although I may not continue to provide updates in the future, I felt compelled to share this last update with you in order to highlight the positive changes that have taken place. Stay strong and never give up on what you believe in, no matter how difficult it may be. You can't predict how it will motivate other people,